Color processes were always being experimented with. From the very beginning of cinema, even before there was a de facto color process, filmmakers occasionally hand-painted frame by frame entire sequences or even entire films. Then later in the silent period, overall tinting for sequences, you know, like blue for night, amber for dawn, or whatever, was also practiced. And then during the 30s, Ray Renahan photographed a film called Mystery of the Wax Museum, using a two-color process which incorporated two strips of film running simultaneously through the camera.
Ray Renahan had been doing some gorgeous stuff with the two-color process earlier, but when the three-color process arrived and they started to appreciate the fact that this was something that was quite sophisticated, the interest in it grew.
The process was recognized as startling. It was subtle and beautifully gradated in its tonality. And interest in it immediately grew and led to some of the really crowning achievements of the late 30s and early 40s in color cinematography.
Have a dance and my reputation will be lost forever.
Enough courage you can do without a reputation.
Oh, you do talk scandalous.
When Gone with the Wind came in, they started on what they called a new film, a fast film. But everything had to be lit with arcs, and with this amount of light, it was very difficult working under those conditions. Victor Fleming, of course, used to be a cameraman before he became a director, and he knew the camera, he knew the limitations. Now the shot of the station with all the dummies and the people dead, and we had to have a special crane that came up from Long Beach. It was a long pole that they used, a derrick-like, and that was a difficult shot. But I thought that was one of the best shots in the picture.
I think for the people who had done black and white to go into color, it was not only a technical adaptation, but it was a philosophical one. Having to learn to see in black and white is a very great discipline, and to suddenly, after years and years of focusing all of your faculties into being able to pre-visualize how a scene was going to appear in black and white, and suddenly say, oh well, here it is, it's in color. Black and white is a much more immediately abstract medium. It's removed from reality by its very nature, and you're more free to associate drama and tonality and so on inside black and white. And I think that's why many of them never wanted to leave it. Those of us who just missed our chance to do black and white, I look forward to the day when I get to do a black and white picture. I have no doubt it's going to be difficult, and I think that for us it's going to be going the other direction.
Leaning on the everlasting arms.
Shame on you, Ruby. Running around the house after that mad dog of a man.
Every one of the old-time DPs, like Charlie Clark and Leon Shamroy and Arthur Miller and James Wong Howe, the people I met and knew, they really thought of it as a job, and they thought of it as a craft. And when you would talk to them about any kind of art kind of thing, they would never kind of admit to it being art. They would say, oh yeah, we did this interesting effect in the picture, and I did this interesting effect and that interesting effect.
When you make a movie, you got to have a screenplay, a story. Well, that story really dictates to what we're going to do, how to shoot it, how to photograph it, how to direct it, how to act it. Everyone is subservient to that. We can go one way or the other to get our own ideas in it, but not get our personality in it.
They're in trouble, folks. Get these papers while they're hot. Ladies, take the hand. Keep your sweatshirt on, Sidney. Oh, the latest paper.
As a
here.
cameraman,
You wanna
I
hurry
tried to
up,
keep the mechanics out as much,
got fresh with the paper.
not to interfere with the scene.
Hey, the late paper,
And I really try to find the most simple approach in lighting. I don't want my photography really to get in the way of the story, of the acting.
I'll remember you, honey. You're the one that got away.
I worked for James Wong Howe as on second unit camera on a picture called Picnic. And I did a number of the game shots and also the last shot of the film, which was a helicopter shot. And at that time, helicopters were not used for photography. The military, the Navy, as a matter of fact, just had helicopters. One of the best moments of my life was when the dailies came on, which was about 3 days later. It was CinemaScope at the time. And I was sitting next to Jimmy Howe, and my scene came up, and it was quite spectacular, particularly to an audience who had not seen helicopter shots before. And Jimmy Howe said, "Oh," he said, "very good, very good." And so even now, like when I shoot, when I do a shot that I really like, I say in my ear the way Jimmy Howe said to me, "Oh, very good, very good."
Oh, no. Give room for the cake.
The anamorphic aspect ratio was extremely horizontal and rectangular. And films up until that time had been composed in almost a square format. And now with this rather large and sometimes empty anamorphic space, it became confusing what to do with the sides of the screen, how much of it to use. And as you see more and more use of Panavision and CinemaScope in the late 50s and early 60s, you start to feel the breadth, the width of the frame being exploited in a very exciting way. So really, when you get to films like Lawrence of Arabia, you have the same kind of excitement and dynamic energy inside this very wide frame that you had in the more square screen of the 40s.
A lot of my generation had been very, very impressed with films from Europe. We'd had an opportunity to see these, and our pioneers, Haskell Wexler and Conrad Hall and so on, who were giving us examples of reacting to the European style. And later on, when you've got Vilmos Zsigmond and Laszlo Kovacs and people that were coming from a European tradition and shooting films here, we got an appreciation of a style that was so different from that practiced in the studios.
Look at Napoleon that Abel Gance made in 1926, and it has every new idea you can conceive of, you know, even today, with steady cams and everything else. I mean, he was swinging cameras from ropes and inventing dollies and cranes and doing all sorts of special effects in the camera. You know, cinematographers start studying new things and old things to sort of invent a new way.
I think that there was an evolution, and I think if a lot of these guys had been younger, that they would have probably shown us a lot of very interesting stuff.
I don't think that each cinematographer can work with each director. There is a kind of magnetic selection that you're doing while you're going. There is a kind of journey that you're doing by yourself. And suddenly you discover that on the same direction you can meet other people, and you can meet a friend. They can do this journey. You can meet people that you can be your guide for a portion of this journey. I think Bernardo was one of the most important ones. Before we start the conformist, Bernardo called me. We start to talk about the conformist. He says, "Vittorio, I mean, what we know about that period? Mainly we know that period, the late 30s, through cinema. So probably we have to use Everything is being given to a cinema to now, through that period, and read from our point of view. We look at that moment at one of the great masters, I think, in American film industry. From Bernardo's point of view was Orson Welles. From my point of view was Greg Toland. Each cinematographer that did everything before my time. So I am the sum of all their experience.
The conformist is almost a compendium of all of cinema language. It incorporates almost all the design, photographic, editorial techniques that have been developed, and does so in a very coherent and clear way.
The shift of so-called styles and techniques in cinematography that happened right around the period of Connie Hall, Haskell Wexler, Vilmos Zsigmond, Laszlo Kovacs, myself, Gordon Willis. It came about because of the directors. You started having new directors who didn't want to work in the studio system, wanted to go shoot pictures on location.
Everything was very exciting and very crazy in those days because we had to make those films very fast. There was no time for it, there was no money for it. The difference was with Easy Rider that we were able to really prepare that production. We took a trip from Los Angeles to New Orleans and scouted a lot of places, and suddenly you are exposed to this incredible vast country which has such a wonderful transition from one area to another, and it just a visual sequence was wonderful, and that's how I learned and got to know the country. And that's magical, to really break down the country and all civilization to these pictorial elements.
We were into images a little differently than the old system. The lighting was a little different. We would try things, and especially I worked with Connie Hall for 5 years. I was his camera operator for 5 years, and we did some great things, I think.
I feel particularly involved in helping make mistakes acceptable to studio heads and other people, and the audience even, by using them, by blatantly, not by mistakes or anything, but by endeavor. If the light shone in the lens and flared the lens, that was considered a mistake. Somebody would report that, the operator would report, the sun hit the lens, it flared the lens, it cut.
There was never a fear. I mean, I've shot with Conrad where Conrad would use so little light that you'd barely see anything in a room, but you'd see it. Where there was nothing safe. Safe was never the word with him.
Getting things too dark or not seeing eyes and things like that. Background too hot, windows blown, things like that nobody would dare do without getting fired in the slick old days.
The second picture I did with Connie was a picture called The Professionals. Connie Hall was the cameraman. I was the camera operator, and Jordan Cronenwith was the assistant cameraman. And the second camera crew was Charles Rocher Jr. and Robert Byrne.
I liked the work that we did on that. Unfortunately, there was an awful lot of night, and night is always a conundrum in photography, day for night, I mean.
Connie was so good at this that we shot a night of them escaping from the compound, Raza's compound, and then they jump in a coal cart and take off during the night, and then they make the jump, and then that was shot at like the last part of the day and brought down. Connie was innovative and very daring, but always extremely solid. And he's got, I think, exquisite taste. And he can make that balance between black and white, color, day, night. And he just looks at it and he just has that innate ability to do that. I mean, I think it's a gift.
I don't think there was a choice about shooting it in color or black and white. There were still 112 pictures being made in black and white that year. That was an easy choice. Doing it widescreen was a harder choice.
When I say pass me a match. Hop in, boys. Where you going? Come on, get in.
And we felt that it might be a really wonderful proscenium to present this material in.
He was in a fever.
The scene where Robert Blake is about to be hanged and he's talking to the chaplain.
It was going to make us a
It was shot on the stage. We had a rain gutter over the top and it was like coming down. And I had a fan off to the side, which wasn't blowing the rain against the window, but was blowing the spray from the rain against the window. The light hitting his face with this phenomenon happening on the windows happened to hit his face one time when I was looking. So I went to Richard and I said, Richard, watch this on his face now, you know what I mean? And we did another rehearsal and you can see the water running down and it drips around. And he's talking about his father and it's very sad he's going to be hanged, but he's playing it very straight. Unemotional.
But I do.
And the visuals were crying for him.
I hate him. And I love him.
I've had so many cinematographers call me and ask me how I did that shot. Huh? Well, I didn't conceive it at all. Richard didn't conceive it. Nobody conceived it. It was purely a visual accident.
I think I was more afraid that I couldn't do it the Hollywood way than I was arrogant or convinced that my way would be a cinematic advance. So I was trying to wed the two.
So anyway, I married the SOB. I had it all planned out. First, he'd take over the history department. Then when Daddy retired, he'd take over the whole college, you know? That was the way it was supposed to be. Getting angry, baby, huh?
What I knew was documentaries. What I knew was the simple way. What I knew is hand-holding. What I knew was how to light realistically. Because most of the time in documentaries, you work with realistic light. The atmosphere was really different, and I was considered a kid, you know, although I was, I don't know, what was I, in my 30s, I guess.
No, sir, this isn't a novel at all. This is the truth. This really happened.
I did help somewhat in my knowledge of film cutting. I did help somewhat in my knowledge of how camera could move, and that also came from my documentary background. I'd written Richard Burton's autobiography that he was against me being the cameraman on Virginia Woolf because he was afraid that with my gutsy newsreel type background that I would show the pockmarks on his face and would be unkind to him, and that Elizabeth took my side, and ultimately he was pleased with the results.
Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf? Virginia.
Some scenes came back when we were shooting in New England, which somebody at the lab felt was too dark, and there was talk of firing me. A lot of this thing I found out later, fortunately. Then I told them my plan that I wanted degrees of darkness and degrees of fill light so that when the early morning light came, we would have some subliminal sense of change in time. But there was a lot of heat on that film.
I don't think that movies should be made because of the dialogue. I think it should have a good story, but I think the important thing has to be how it is told visually. And you know, dialogue should be like music in a film.
Hey, John McCabe? Mrs. Miller, come from Fairport to see you.
McCabe and Mrs. Miller was an excellent example of being a partner with the director. Altman wanted to have a special look for this movie. He didn't really know exactly what he was looking for. And then when we started to talk about it, and he said that he had something in his mind like old pictures, old faded color photographs. I right away knew that what he was talking about. And I immediately started to experiment with flashing. I told him about flashing, that how we can desaturate the colors and how we can achieve the faded look. Flashing is basically, it's almost like fogging the film, like putting a layer of fog over the negative. So what happens is the blacks are not going to be really black. It's going to be a sort of grayish. Because the blacks are not as black, you see sort of into the shadow areas more. Also has another effect, it desaturates the colors.
Well, tell me, any news from down there, Paul? It's been a while since I've been here.
How many men are there around here?
Well, this here's an interesting town.
I myself got a little bit tired of this faded look. And I started to tell him that, Robert, maybe we should not do the whole picture this way. Maybe we should have some variation, you know. And he said, absolutely not. We are not going to compromise. I'm behind you. I will defend you against everybody in the world if they come and complain about this look. And of course, the studio complained about the look very much.
Motion pictures were really breaking away from the Hollywood system.
I don't let you go to no Dr. Hill nobody ever heard of. The best is what you're gonna have, young lady. Where's your telephone, huh?
It's in the bedroom.
There's a shot. Roman says, Billy, he gave me a POV of Ruth. And I got him framed perfectly. Beautifully see her on the phone talking. I said, okay, Roman, we're ready. And he comes over, he looks, he says, no, Billy, no, Billy, move to the left, and kindly move. And I look through and I see just the back of Ruth Gordon seated on the bed. And you can't see her face or see the telephone. I said, but you can't see her. He says, exactly. I said, oh, okay. So now we go to the theater, and 800 people in the theater all go to see around the door jam. New York had a style all its own, and I call it a street style. It was something because they didn't have the shops, the labs, the equipment that we had here in Hollywood. And it developed its own styles. They didn't believe in the fusion. They didn't believe in what they would do in Hollywood when you'd have to shoot a major motion picture star.
It was a situation in which, for reasons of style and money and time and things, they went into the streets and shot in real places. And that probably is the beginning of what is used in our time as that sort of New York look.
Billy Daniels shot a picture called The Naked City. And at that time, there was a bunch of new lights that had come out called Fay lights. And that's how he lit everything, no arcs or anything else like that. And he shot the whole picture, what I call a New York style. Naked City was, he went right into their own backyard and did exactly what they did, and did it. And you copy those styles. How do you do better than the waterfront, on the waterfront? You don't. See, you believed it. It was there. You were there. You were part of that. You were part of that cold climate. You were part of the cold world. You were part of that whole thing. It was beautiful. And it had great blacks in it, too. People don't recognize the blacks there were, but all the exterior stuff and the night stuff, they had great, rich blacks.